My friends, kindly allow me a moment here by your router and to use some of your bandwidth to relay to you some words of encouragement and challenge. Last week, we sat together with Franklin Roosevelt's Four Freedoms, a moral map drawn by a man who understood exactly how dark the world could get and drew the map anyway. Four simple declarations: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Tonight, I want to get back to the first one, not because it is the most urgent. I will make the case that the last one underlies all the others, and we will get there. But because freedom of speech is the hinge, without it, the other three cannot be defended, cannot even be named properly. A people that cannot speak plainly about what is wrong cannot fix what is wrong. Roosevelt put it first for a reason. In 1941, the threat to free speech was legible. It wore a uniform. It burned books in public squares. It shut down newspapers, arrested editors, rewrote history in real time, and called the rewriting patriotism. You could point at it. You could name it. The people of occupied Europe knew exactly what the loss of free speech felt like because they were living it. The knock at the door, the disappeared neighbor, the mandatory enthusiasm for things you did not believe. Roosevelt named that as an American, concerned not because it was happening here, because he understood that it could. That free speech is not a permanent condition. It is a choice a society makes and keeps making, actively, or loses it. He was very right about that. What he could not have anticipated, what none of them could have anticipated, was the threat would not always arrive with jackboots and a uniform. That would sometimes arrive quietly, through the back door, wearing the clothes of freedom itself. Yet, we have not lost freedom of speech in the legal sense. The First Amendment still stands. You can say what you believe. You can print what you know. You can stand on a corner or sit by your router and speak your mind to anyone who will listen. And yet, something has happened to the commons. The shared space where free people argue and question and change each other's minds, that space, not the legal right, but the living practice of it, is in serious trouble. Not because of censorship exactly, because of noise. There is more speech today than at any other moment in human history. More voices, more platforms, more words per second pouring through devices into more homes than Roosevelt could have had imagined in his most optimistic vision. Every person with a device can speak to millions. The barriers that once limited those who could address the public, the printing press, the broadcast license, the editorial board, those barriers are gone. And as a result, paradoxically, it has become harder to hear. When everything is signal, nothing is signal. When a lie travels faster than the truth, and the evidence is clear that it does, that outrage spreads further than accuracy, that the fear and anger move through a network like electricity, while calm and careful reasoning moves like water uphill. When that is the architecture of the commons, free speech becomes a weapon turned against itself. You can say anything, and because you can say anything, nothing means anything. The Founding Fathers had a theory about this. They believed in what you might call the marketplace of ideas. Put the truth and the lie in the same room, let them compete openly, and over time the truth wins. People are reasonable. Evidence persuades. The better argument carries the day. It is a generous theory. It assumes good faith on all sides. It assumes the playing field is roughly level. It assumes that the goal of everyone in the room is actually to find the truth. What it did not account for was a playing field deliberately tilted. A room where some of the participants were not at all interested in the truth, are in fact paid handsomely to prevent it, to manufacture confusion, to make the simple complicated and the clear murky. What it did not account for was the industrialization of the lie. This is not new. Yellow journalism, propaganda, the deliberate manipulation of public opinion, these are as old as the printing press itself. What is new is the scale. What is new is the speed. What is new is that the technology we built to connect us turned out to be extraordinarily good at dividing us, and that certain interests found that division is profitable and invested in it accordingly. Roosevelt's free press was supposed to be an immune system of democracy. The journalist who goes where power would prefer no one to look, who asks the questions powers would prefer not to answer, who tells the citizen what the citizen needs to know to make a free decision. That press still exists. There are still journalists doing that kind of work at considerable personal cost in some cases, but they are operating inside a system that buries their signal under an avalanche of noise that has made the reader so exhausted and suspicious that even honest reporting lands with a simple skeptical shrug. When you cannot tell the difference between the journalist and the propagandist, when they look the same, speak the same, occupy the same feed side by side, the instinct is to trust neither. And a citizenry that trusts nothing is not a free citizenry. It is the confused one, and confused people are easy to lead. Freedom of speech was designed to protect the truth teller. The person who sees not something wrong and says so, the person who challenges the powerful and accepts the consequences, the person who stands up in the Commons and says, "This is not right, and here is the evidence, and I will not lie quiet about it." That is who the First Amendment was written for. Not for the comfortable, not for the already powerful, not for those whose speech needed no protection, because they already own the means of delivering it, but for the truth teller, and today that protection is most loudly invoked by those who wish to drown the truth teller out, who wrap themselves in language of free speech while working methodologically to make honest speech impossible. Through volume, through harassment, through the manufacture of so much noise, the signal disappears and the truth teller gives up, or is shouted down, or simply cannot be heard above the roar. This is not what Roosevelt meant. This is not what the founders meant. And we ought to say so plainly without embarrassment, without hedging, without false balance that treats the arsonist and the firefighter as equivalent parties in a reasonable disagreement about fire. I said Roosevelt put this one first for a reason, and I think the reason is this. A free people must be able to talk to each other, not past each other, not at each other, to each other. Must be able to sit with the hard fact and turn it over together. Must be able to say, "I was wrong about that. The evidence changed my mind." It must be able to hear the uncomfortable thing and stay in the room with it rather than retreating to the comfort of the echo. That capacity. To talk to each other honestly, to share commons, to operate from something like a shared set of facts even when we disagree fiercely about what to do with them. That's not a luxury. That is the load-bearing wall of the whole structure. When it goes, the others follow. You cannot protect freedom of worship in a commons that is fractured into tribes, and each convinced the other is an existential threat. You cannot address freedom from want when you cannot agree on the most basic facts about who is hungry and why. You cannot confront the freedom of fear when fear itself has become the primary product of the information environment. Roosevelt was right to put it first. We have work to do. My friends, I'm going to leave you tonight not with despair, but with the thing Roosevelt always left people with, a direction. Talk to each other. Not to the feed, not to the algorithm, not to the reflection of your own existing beliefs, to each other. The neighbor you disagree with, the person across the table who sees it differently. Stay in the room. Ask the questions. Listen to the answer. It's a small thing, but it's also the whole thing. The Commons is not a website. It is not a platform. It is not owned by anyone and cannot be taken from you unless you abandon it. The Commons is what happens when citizens decide to speak honestly to each other and listen honestly in return. That is what Roosevelt meant. That is what freedom is for. We, the people. Not yet what we should be, but not finished yet either. Thank you. God bless, and God bless the United States of America.